The following podcast was produced in-house for KQEK.com. Back in early May of 2016, I interviewed author and journalist Tom Roston in a podcast on his book, I Lost It at the Video Store, a filmmaker's oral history of a vanished era, which sought to capture the impact of the once-everywhere bricks-and-mortar video store on many future filmmakers, including Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Darren Aronofsky, and many more. The book wasn't a nostalgia piece, but on occasion a few of the interviewees bled nostalgia for a way of exploring movies that in many major and smaller locales no longer exist. I mentioned back in May that Toronto was unusual in having several stores that continue to sell and rent movies, TV shows, and related media that collectively form a massive history of film that doesn't exist in the same manner online, either through streaming sites such as Netflix or commercial online portals. Each year, however, brings forth changes, and even Toronto loses some of its shops that have been mainstays for decades. Queen Video's Queen Street store is gone, and the venerable Suspect Video is in the process of selling off its stock as the site, part of a massive block that houses Honest Ed's, will be developed into a mixed-income commercial and rental development. Suspect will return in an online incarnation, the brand name's too valuable and the tastes and needs of its clientele too important to leave unattended. But there's roughly 9 stores left in Toronto. It's still good for a major city, but still rare given most of the stores still exist in the city's West End, where rents, property taxes, and corporate gentrification, condofication, and exerting ongoing pressure on long-term tenants are altering the character of neighborhoods that were once populated by a variety of specialty mom-and-pop indie shops. When Rogers folded its remaining paltry rental stores and Blockbuster Canada shut down its hefty square-footage shops in 2011, critics and pundits took note of an industry that was not just dying, but dead. As they professed, everything would be dead. No more DVDs, no Blu-rays, everyone would be streaming and storing their entertainment goods on clouds, and the need to leave your house became less necessary. In many communities, that was the case with shuttering stores, but physical media and the desire to own isn't over. And studios are still putting out discs. They're licensing deep catalog titles to indie labels for DVD and Blu-ray releases, so clearly, physical media isn't dead, and neither is the video store. What survives and how the classic experience of buying and renting will remain in a state of flux. The biggest and best that remain in 2 to 5 years may well be comprised of libraries collected from folding shops with their own curated titles, housed in not-for-profit archives. It's the rest-in-peace nostalgia pieces in written and visual form that kind of prompted me to make a documentary on the daily minutiae of a classic bricks-and-mortar video store. But I didn't want it to be a classic doc because it's already been done, and some daily activities don't exactly lend themselves to visually arresting material. The proposed short film, titled BSV 1172, was built on the premise of capturing an obsolete form of entertainment using obsolete technology, dead tech, and if not to capture the nuances in eccentric experimental terms, then at least show their viability in unconventional sights and sounds. I used vintage tube video cameras spanning the early 1980s and one from the 1970s, old analog video processors, VHS and SVHS tape stock, and finished the short film digitally. The resulting film was begun in the fall of 2012 and was formally finished in the spring of 2016, a kind of long maturation period, and had its world premiere today at the 2016 San Diego Underground Film Festival. Perhaps because of the ongoing resilience of physical media, bricks-and-mortar shops, and humans that want to own and rent instead of streaming content during their limited windows of availability by providers, BSV 1172, Your Friendly Neighbourhood Video Store, isn't an elegy nor a straight documentation on what was, but an alternate hyper-reality of what still exists. The film was shot after hours at Bay Street Video with my colleague, Mark Hansen, and in May of 2016 the store was also the location where Tom Roston engaged in a roughly 90-minute discussion on video store culture, its legacy, and its increasing status as a film culture archive of what was otherwise absent from online streaming providers. The first half of the Q&A is showcased in a slightly edited form in this podcast, and coming soon is the shorter part 2 with some audience interaction between Roston and Wilner. Both podcasts have some technical issues that stem from a live in-store taping, but I've minimized the most serious without taking away from the casual nature of the Q&A. I'll be back after part 1 with some closing thoughts, but I will point out that around the 20-minute mark into the discussion, there's a certain canine visitor who makes himself known. His name is Percy, he's a French bulldog, and he's probably the happiest dog in the world. And now, Norm Wilner chats with Tom Roston about losing it at the video store.
So this is fairly unstructured in that we will be taking Q's and A's and things. But if there's something you want to jump in on, like, feel free, I guess. I'm open to it. Tom's open to it. The appeal of the book, I read it. It came out just after TIFF, right? Because that's where I bought mine at the Lightbox. Like, felt like in a whirlwind of other things to just give. But I've been waiting for somebody to write a book about video store culture, and for a decade or more, probably. So once we realized that the curtains were starting to fall on the larger industry, and it was going to be the responsibility of small, passionate, small businesses to keep home video rental and sale alive in the post-Tower Records, Best Buy kind of era, where it's more about moving units and it's not about actually having people who know what they're talking about behind the counter, and actually shaping an experience of coming into a store and finding the sweet spot between the customer and the product, and making people find movies that they might not otherwise find, or discover television shows that they might never have heard of, which is the reason I still frequent these things. I mean, I have more access than almost anybody, and I still come in for discoveries like once every couple of weeks because you kind of need to. But your angle on it, which was finding filmmakers who were influenced by the video stores and who worked, in some cases or all cases, worked in them and had access to the plethora, that was just a perfect connective tissue to this story, because it creates that lifeline, like the literal lifeline between the art of film and the artists who are creating new films and harvesting and feeding on home video and access and VHS and beta and Laserdisc way back when. When I first interviewed Quentin Tarantino in 1992, we both bonded over having worked in video stores. And we'd had the same experience, as it turned out, of finding things we shouldn't have found in boxes that... When I worked at Jumbo Video, which was a Blockbuster before Blockbuster came to Canada, someone tried to knock off the idea and have a great big store full of everything. And to do that, they bought lots, literally pallets of videos from other stores in other parts of Canada. So when we were unpacking and setting up the store, we were finding the R-rated or unrated versions of movies that you weren't supposed to have in Ontario. Under the Theatres Act, legally you couldn't have the uncut Day of the Dead. There was an electronically edited version, which was an abomination. They actually cut frames out electronically, and a person would put a gun in his head and then suddenly be on the ground. It was just a terrible hack cut. It was awful. But we had the unrated version, and so we were feasting on it. And with Tarantino, he told me that he found Chinese tapes that had been subtitled badly, but were still his first opportunity to see John Woo and everything like that. And then here he was in 1992 in Toronto, and it must have been Hardboiled was screening the hour after Reservoir Dogs in Toronto, and he was just giddy at the possibility of being able to interact with this world that he'd only been a spectator to. And it helped form his perspective. And I was a kid in the same way, and even though I didn't go into filmmaking, the immersion of the video store, the idea that not only was it possible to see something you didn't know existed, but that there were 5 other things like it that also didn't reveal themselves to you until that moment, just the sense of discovery, that's something that seems to be going away. And as you'll see when you read the book, getting filmmakers to talk about their inspirations and their moments of connection, even if it is just harassing people for having the wrong opinion when they work behind the counter, which I never did. Everybody's right, even when they're wrong. That's something that people really need to know about, that we're not this, like, filmmakers, film critics, video store patrons, we're not this cloistered people who are just grabbing things for ourselves. We actually want to share. And so how did you, like, it must have been fairly easy, I think, to get them going once they started talking, but how did you actually start to put this together?
The idea came when actually the last Blockbuster was closed a couple years ago, if you guys remember that.
It was in Kansas or something, wasn't it?
There are actually some residual Blockbusters that were not part of the franchise, and there might even be a couple still left. Mm-hmm. But when those closed down, film journalists started writing these, nostalgia pieces about, I love the video store and it meant so much to me. And I thought, what about the filmmakers? That's what I want to hear about, because we all know that Tarantino, Kevin Smith, these guys, found their visions, their voices through their video store, the work of the video store in the 80s and 90s. So that was like the initial step off. But as I started contacting people, because I've been a film journalist for many years, I knew publicists and I knew some people, and so I would just start contacting one filmmaker and then another filmmaker, and the ones who end up in the book are the ones who were most excited about talking about it. And I was surprised that there were people like, as much as I was psyched to talk to David O. Russell, it was more like I had a contact with him, but I found out that, who knew that David O. Russell's first script was a horror script? I mean, to me that was like really fascinating to find out that he truly lost it at the video store, because what he would do is he would watch Chinatown over and over and over again until he memorized it. And talking to him, I like the idea that the video store could actually translate into how a person makes a film was so clear. I mean, we know it pretty well with Tarantino and Kevin Smith, but the David O. Russell would reenact Chinatown and just do it because that's just his personality. But then later on, when he would pitch films as a filmmaker, long after Spanking the Monkey, he would go into meetings with financiers and producers, and he would tell his movie just the same way he used to tell Chinatown. So I mean, that you can say that's a direct link from the video store to his experience in the video store, watching a VHS tape, to how he made his movies. And there are examples of that with Kevin Smith and Tarantino and everyone else. But to me, it's like it seems like an obvious idea. Like a lot of people said, oh yeah, someone should have thought that a long time ago to do that. And I was like, luckily I was the guy to do it. And it became more and more apparent that it worked just by talking to these filmmakers.
It's a different relationship to film. Obviously, if you're seeing it from the perspective of someone who is going to be a filmmaker, like somebody who is absorbing that kind of thing. But Jumbo was a 24-hour store for the years that I was there, and we would run The Thing after midnight because it was fascinating. And even Pan and Scan, you'd fall into it. You would want to just watch it over and over again. I realize I know the dialogue off by heart at this point. Not that I'm going to reenact it, but that's something I could see Russell doing. The different temperaments too of filmmakers, and with I can completely picture David O. Russell taking something apart while he's watching it, as opposed to Tarantino or Smith just consuming, because that was like they're gorgers. They grab everything, and you can see it in their work. They sort of recontextualize and burp it out in a different way.
Totally.
I've referred to Tarantino as like a garburator of whatever genre he's going after, because whatever it is, it's going to come out in a form you don't recognize, but still retains the spirit of whatever it is he's doing. So how long did it take to put this whole thing together?
This might be too much inside baseball, but in case you're curious, this new press, the Critical Press, which published the book and has published a lot of film books in the last year, it's a very small press, and they, from start to finish, it was incredibly fast. The reporting was maybe 3 or 4 months. And I have to say there was kind of stressful months, because the first 2 months I did not have Kevin Smith or Tarantino. And so without one of those guys, I thought, I do not have a book, because no one's going to want to read a book that doesn't have one of those guys in it. And so it was pretty stressful at first, but I got them eventually. And then so it was about 3 months of reporting, and then another couple more months of writing, and so it was maybe 5 months, 6 months tops, which is pretty fast for a book. I mean, it's a small book, but that's how long it took.
Wow. And the reception has been such that, I guess, how can I put it without sounding insulting to video store culture? Everyone who needs to know about it probably already knows about it. It's the kind of thing where, thanks to social media and an engaged publisher, the word is out.
I think, yeah, definitely the word is out. And I'm overwhelmed and really pleased with the kind of people I've been meeting across the country. I've been in Chicago, LA, Austin, Texas, outside Philly, and my hometown, New York City. And it's a real range of ages. I mean, I'm Generation X. I feel like the filmmakers are mostly Generation X, people born from 60 to 80, who really grew up with the rise of the video store. But there's this whole younger generation, including a couple of the filmmakers, Alex Ross Perry and even Joe Swanberg, and some of the kids who are here today. I don't know if there's... No, I think we're all Generation X or older, pretty much, right? But there have been a few places where people are in their 20s or young 20s, and they're digging it. And it's cool to me to find that. And it's also been really interesting to go from one town to another and see where video store culture is thriving. And I definitely think Toronto is like way up there. I think Toronto and LA are the two strongest that I in terms of my experience, maybe I'm wrong, but anecdotally, they're the two strongest communities in terms of video store culture, and so props to you guys for keeping it going.
Yeah.
New York, I'm a little ashamed to say, is pretty limp, especially with the closing of Kim's. Does anyone ever go to Kim's? Great store, but not a good economic model, and that guy closed it down. Mr. Kim.
Famously impenetrable, I guess, in its culture. It was not always, you were saying, a welcoming place to go.
Yeah.
I used to go in, it was on St. Mark's Place, Lower Manhattan, near Cooper Union, and students would go in and people would just be there to, again, just to discover stuff, to find out what new Italian action movie was showing up or what weird new English I think they had English TV they were transcoding before, like they had the PAL to NTSC editions of stuff, but this is my memory of it anyway, back when that was a thing on VHS. They would have things that no one else had in the entire city, and they were also the first people to tell you that you didn't know this thing that they had found. That was kind of the attitude in Kim's. It was like, well, this is, it was a hipster store before there were hipster stores.
And the amazing thing is the way it died. I mean, as I'm sure you know, if anyone, I'm sure if you ever want to read a great article about a video store, the death of Kim's is fascinating. I wrote a piece for the New York Times about the last death of it, but that was kind of a minor piece. This other piece is much better, actually, if I may say. I think it was in the Village Voice, and it's about how Mr. Kim sold off the whole stock of VHS tapes to this weird consortium of people in Italy. Yeah. And so now there are about 40,000, I think, tapes in Sicily.
Like shipped by container.
Shipped by container that are sitting and rotting because of some weird corrupt deal, because Mr. Kim wanted to retain the library. And so that was the only option he had.
And this was in like 2008, right? When
yeah,
it was already over for VHS.
Yeah, it was, and he sold off the main library. The store still existed up to like 2014. Mm-hmm. But that's to me like quintessential video store, arcana. It's perfect. But I mean, I think it's out of, not that this is in response to a question. For me, it's been really interesting to go to video stores because I no longer go to video stores. In New York City, where I live, my lifestyle, because I'm a film journalist, I get a lot of free stuff, and yes, I use Netflix. How many people use Netflix?
I do.
See, that's interesting. Most places I go to, including the clerks, all use Netflix. Vast majorities. So it's interesting that there's maybe even less than half here. But I'm one of the sullied. I use it. And so for me to go to stores, it's been fascinating because I'm talking about it like it's something that has died. For you guys, for a lot of people, it's not. And it's an interesting cultural shift that we're entering where the dominant era, I think we can all agree, the dominant era of the video store is over. And yet, there are still places like this. And so that's why I'm very psyched that we're doing this right now. You're saying it's the first of your kind of events. I think, let's create a cultural spaces where people can talk about film, talk about video stores, and get together, like you guys are still doing, but maybe in a slightly different way. So, glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say when I was in New York in January, I interviewed. I have a podcast. You should all listen to it. It's great. I have a podcast called Someone Else's Movie, where an actor, writer, filmmaker talks about a movie they love that they have no connection to, and I made an exception for someone who wasn't a filmmaker yet, but he's directing now, so it's okay. A guy named Aaron Hillis, who runs Video Free Brooklyn. Is it the only video store in Brooklyn, or one of the last two?
No, there's another one, Video Drome or something like that.
Yeah, so he told me in January, this was the case, there are 6 remaining stores in the 5 boroughs. And it's gotten to the point now where if they don't have something, they know which other store does. Because people only ask for...
Wow.
Yeah, there's only 5 or 6 movies in play in any given week, he said. Mm-hmm. And what he was finding is that no one under 30 comes in, period, except on Friday nights when the kids think it's cool. And they arrange a trip and they come in and they look at stuff.
Retro.
And they, it's become retro. And they probably won't rent anything on Blu-ray because they only like DVD because it's closer to the vinyl thing is killing you people. It's killing if anyone under 30 is listening. But the idea that my wife's nephew, who's in his 20s, is actually getting into VHS now, and I have to explain to him that he's going to kill himself, or I will kill him for watching like 4x3 pan and scan versions of Carpenter movies because that's what they looked like then. No, they fucking didn't. But the idea now that we've reached the point where even with Netflix, where streaming services are, for the most part, capable of presenting a decent theatrical equivalent experience. It looks as good as it can, unless you're projecting it, in HD. A Blu-ray will look better than a streaming signal because it's coming out in 24 frame and it's better. But the idea is now that the theatrical experience is reserved for Captain America and Batman vs. Superman and stuff that comes in IMAX, that it's like there's this perception, he was saying, that it's all the same once it's on your television at home, whether you're watching it through your Apple TV or you're watching it from a disc or you're watching it from a streaming service, that in some weird way now we just all accept that this is what it looks like, so it doesn't matter how you get it. But that loses out on the possibility of special features and supplements. I brought a bunch of old Criterion Laserdiscs. If anybody wants to take one home and frame them, please do, because they're great. And they, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have widescreen, or we wouldn't have had it on DVD as quickly as we did, and we wouldn't have all the special features that we have come to accept from everything behind me. And most of that stuff is still fairly sparse. I mean, Netflix isn't doing any of those extras. iTunes will include them here and there, but again, you're dealing with media that could be lost in a hard drive crash. You're dealing with the possibility of an ephemeral experience. All of your video files are subject to one power surge, and they don't. And the model is, of course, that of course you can't pay to back it up, because if you can re-download it, we don't get the next $9.99. And the idea of this endless feeding in on itself. Here, you buy it, it's yours. You can take it home. You can watch it at your house. You can watch it somewhere else. You can watch it when the internet goes down, which is something nobody seems to be thinking about with streaming services. But the relationship to the idea of, I have to get out of the house, has changed. Like, it used to be that you would do that, to go to the video store, and we would see the same people at the same time every night, because they'd be coming home. Back in the VHS days, you'd return the disc you just rented and pick up, or the tape you just rented, and you'd pick up something new. Sorry, I thought someone was laughing. That's even better. That's great.
That's one of the normal patrons right here.
Yeah, no, I bring my dog all the time. He's used to the cookies. The last one was ago. But the idea that physical media is somehow a negative when you can actually own a movie that you love and put it on the wall. Like, I have 4 strips of 2001 in 70mm on my wall, framed. Right. Those aren't going anywhere.
It speaks to something that I really appreciate, the covetousness of owning something, and how, for me, I didn't own, I taped more.
That's how it starts, right?
Yeah, and so I just love to have a library of tapes that I had handwritten myself. And again, it was one of the things that just resonated for me really well, was to realize that when I was talking to these filmmakers, their experiences were a lot like our experiences. For us, it was owning the tapes. Yeah. For them, it was getting their name. I mean, you got do you have directors' shelves?
Yep.
Yeah. So you have director shelves, and to these filmmakers, every single filmmaker I talked to mentioned that. I made sure to ask everyone. Every single one said that was. Well, no, they didn't say it in exactly these words, but they pretty much said, when I saw my name on a shelf, that's when I knew I was a filmmaker. It felt like that was when they were, became what they had, aspired to be. Who said? Darren Aronofsky, when he went to Kim's, right, he saw his name under his buddy Wes Anderson's, and he took a picture, and he sent it to him, and said, "Look, we made it," and it was just this, like, cultural moment that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's no filmmaker who says, I made on someone's Netflix queue. That just doesn't exist.
I'm new and noteworthy.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think that goes to one of the closing chapters of the book. It's the question of, like, okay, so this is very much about how filmmakers were influenced by the video store era from the 80s and 90s. But what about filmmakers now who are, using BitTorrents and streaming? How are they going to be influenced? Like, what's going to be their impact? How are they going to say that their medium of choice, or the way they took in movies, influenced their visions and the way they make movies? I mean, I'm not going to be such a fuddy-duddy and say there was no influence, or it's just a shit influence. There must be some, influence there, but what it is, it's going to be different from what Tarantino and Kevin Smith got off these, going through the shelves.
Yeah, I think that the idea of sharing something you love is going to change. Now we have playlists, right? The idea is that you can program someone's entertainment for them, but I don't know that there's an equivalent in cinema unless it's somebody like Edgar Wright programming a night, programming a week of screenings at the Bloor because he was here shooting Scott Pilgrim, and they gave him this toy to play with, and they screen whatever he asked them to, which is fantastic. And when that happens, that happens in LA all the time at the New Beverly, which Tarantino now owns, right? And so he's feeding it into itself. But they also chose not to screen DCPs. They're only screening film, which is self-limiting in a different way, because there are now hundreds, if not thousands, of movies that don't exist on film, period. And we're constantly seeing these carte blanche nights where you get one weird thing, but people will stay home and watch it there instead of coming out and seeing it, experiencing it with the filmmaker at the Lightbox or wherever. It's just, Bay Street has a free films program, which I've programmed myself a couple of times just because it's so much fun. Where is there one right now, or are we between them? Is it still Canadian Films? Okay, so because of Canadian Film Day, National Canadian Film Day, you can come in and rent for free a Canadian movie or two is the limit? Two at a time, and just go and watch them. And it's a gift of culture.
It's amazing, yeah.
And that's the sharing impulse, which I don't think really exists on a one-to-one scale, except on the billions to billions scale, which is file sharing, which is not the same thing at all. And there's it makes me sound like the cranky old guy, but there's a warmth to coming in and being welcomed and shown things, as opposed to here is a menu that everyone else on the planet can see, and click on something, we don't care. Like just $9.99. It's not the same. And the culture of even this right now, you guys are all here because you're interested in a thing in a room together. That doesn't happen so often anymore, and it's really nice. And hopefully your gaze, if I'm talking too long, your mind is wandering and you can see something maybe you want to rent over my shoulder, which is totally fine.
Right. You guys probably are aware of this, but a lot of the stores are going nonprofit. Like Scarecrow, and
has Vidiot's done that?
And Vidiot's just did it. Although Vidiot's has the weight of Megan Ellis and Annapurna Pictures, which has helped finance them.
It says we're non-profit.
What?
It says we're profit.
Right.
It's more of a spiritual distinction.
and then there are these attempts, but it becomes this sense that it's like this social cause, where people are going nonprofit, and then there are some benefactors like Megan who are helping out, and then there's Alamo Draft House. Do you guys have them in Canada?
Not yet.
Not yet.
They're probably coming.
It's a chain of theaters that started in Texas, and it's a very progressive-minded, film-friendly guy, Tim League, who started it. And he saved a couple of video stores in San Francisco and put the store, one of these great old stores like yours, into his new theater. And the genius there is that he put the store where the exit is. So when people exit the theater, they go through the video store, exit through the gift shop, right?
Learn from Disney.
Yeah, no, it is, go for it, right? And so, and also the other genius, he said he told me he was going to do this, I don't know if it's true, but the issue often probably is that it's laziness. People don't want to go to the store and have to come back. So they're going to go with the Netflix model and say you can mail, they're going to have these envelopes so you can mail the DVDs back. So you don't have to come back. So you go see your movie at the theater, you go rent the movie, another movie, and then you can mail it back. So you don't have to feel obligated to come back. So there's a lot of thought going on, and there's I think it ain't gonna die entirely, and it's heartening to see that happen.
Yeah, just throwing it out to you guys. What was the last film that you discovered or were led to discover by a video store? What was the last thing you just took a blind flyer on? Anybody?
Last night, Trash.
The D'Alessandro, the Warhol film?
Warhol, right?
One of the staff. No, not Warhol.
Stephen Daldry.
Oh, okay. That I don't even... Oh, yes, that's right. Didn't even get a theatrical release here. I think it played in the Human Rights Watch... No, I'm getting that wrong. It was supposed to play a festival and it didn't.
Beside your ankle, I think, Norm.
Under T... Togetherness.
Trash, right there.
Oh, yeah, there it is. If anyone would like to... it's in stock currently. Yes. So, good example. Anybody else? I'll just keep piling them.
Cafe de Flore.
Oh, isn't that great?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
First LA, then it's all the others.
That's fair.
It was somewhat downhill from there.
I don't know. I thought Demolition and Cafe.
I haven't
de
seen
Flora-
Demolition yet.
Yeah, there's some real commonalities there, even though he didn't write it. Which
Yeah.
is sort of interesting.
I mean, I think the in the era of Google, it's really interesting, and that 20 years ago, when there wasn't the internet as much, people, the way you found movies, Video Hound. Does everyone remember Video Hound?
Yeah, sure.
You have it. I mean, to me, that's what I actually more than even videos in a way. Those books meant so much to me. Just the way they described the movies. I collected them every year. I think I got it for Christmas every year. The way people found movies back in the day was to, either through clerks or through roaming the aisles. But now everything is so direct. It's a straight line. You get your, you find one filmmaker. You can find out what he's done if you look on IMDb. It's not a terrible thing. It's just a different thing. It's a different way people process information and find stuff. I mean, Joe Swanberg, good example of a guy who said, he saw Hudsucker Proxy, I think, the Coen Brothers movie, and he didn't know who these guys were. He was like, Coen Brothers, and then one day he stumbled on another movie. It was by this guy Joel Coen. It was like, that's how and he was like, wow, this guy made more than one movie. I mean, the fact that
It's true. If you see the Hudsucker Proxy, it seems unlikely that
It's true. But what a different way to experience film and to go into a room and discover stuff. Like another example for me is posters. Posters were a huge influence on me. I was a poster collector. I actually got more music-related posters, but Werner Herzog's Agia, Wrath of God, to me, that poster was just so weird. I looked at that poster and just what's going on? I was 15, 14. It's what is this guy about? And I saw that movie, and it just it opened up this whole world to me. And again, a connection between just just a guy like me and Darren. I told Darren Aronofsky that story, and he was like, "Yeah, I've got that poster in my production office's frame." So it's I saw some heads nodding. We all know what that was like, to experience that. And so it was this shared community where filmmakers and clerks and patrons, we all experienced it on some level. Yeah. So different from going, who talks about, I Googled this and I found it. There's no story there. There's no connection there. There's no heart or, feeling there. So.
Yeah, it's I was going to say it's a colder world, but it's not, because there's all this. There's still pockets, but
right.
You really now have to become, it's Herzog, right? You have to become a warrior for the thing that you love. You
right.
have to become a gladiator just to fight your way to get to the store, which is a ridiculous exaggeration. We walk here. But the idea is that you're still doing something by coming to the store, by you're participating instead of just staying home.
The spectrum for me is very much in terms of the filmmakers, is you've got Tarantino, who's he doesn't stream, he hates that shit, he owns all his tapes, he bought his old store, he bought out his old store and all 8,000 tapes. But then you've got most of the filmmakers in the book are you know what, you gotta go with the new tide, I stream, and so there isn't, there isn't, that sort of Luddite thing for most of the filmmakers, because they want to meet film fans. They want to know where, they want to go where film fans go. So for me, one of the discoveries of the book was to hear from Darren Aronofsky, who said that he actually does his sound design for his films knowing that someone's going to be watching that movie on a small screen. And I was a little devious, and I mentioned that to Tarantino, and he said that's the most depressing thing I've ever heard.
It does break my heart. The
Yeah,
idea that people are walking outside, watching movies and television on their phones. Every time I hear someone say that, and I heard it again yesterday, someone was on the radio saying, well, I was watching that, I caught up to the show on my phone. It's why? Do you hate life? I mean, it's not made to be watched pixel by pixel. It's just even a television set.
I
but
know.
The idea of reduction as this new normal, it explains why phones are now getting bigger again, because people sort of subconsciously want a larger frame. But, does anybody do that here? You guys watch television or movies? Is there a barrier?
John Stewart made a joke about that at the Oscars when he hosted.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, he said, it's great, you can watch Lawrence of Arabia phone, and then he turns the phone over and says, but you have to see it in widescreen.
That's horrible.
Perfect.
Mark will remember, I had a video 8 for plane trips. There was a point where I was flying back and forth to Los Angeles a couple times a year, and I bought a little video Walkman and put Jaws and Lawrence on it in scope just to see. And the battery died 10 minutes in, and I didn't get to watch either. I had the whole flight planned and couldn't watch anything. But subsequently did it, and it's possible. You can do it, but why would you?
But the iPad, I've watched
the iPad is probably capable of it, yeah.
iPad to me feels as small as I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It fills my whole sort of frame of... I'm surprised by how much I can get engaged in a movie on the iPad.
But that's the movie doing it, right? Like, you're still responding to the film.
That's right. You know,
I suppose I'm making the argument for the phone myself now.
Well,
I
haven't gone that small yet. But it's like the iPad takes up your whole... If you hold it far enough, it takes up the same amount of space that the TV at the other end of the room does, or that the theater screen does. It's you're fooled, right? Proportionally.
Yeah.
So that's what what we're talking about now is the quality, right? The way the film was made and the intention. Now, another issue that's related to the video store to me is community and just how people talk about movies, because you guys still have it because you come here and you can talk about movies. I guess as a film journalist I get to do because I go to film festivals, and so that helps me talk about it. But I want to throw something out there, and I'm curious because I've gotten a lot of negativity from other filmmakers about it. But I feel like, and I don't want to bring on the death of the video store any more than it already has happened, but I feel like video sharing is an answer, which is to say people watching movies on screens together. So you have 10, 15 people. There's a website called Rabbit. You can have 15 people watching one Netflix screen together, and you can have little heads together, and you can have comments, and you can either turn off comments or you can hear each other talk, watching a movie together. And whenever I talk to filmmakers about it, they're like, no, because they want people to focus on their movies. But to me, I don't know, it's communal. It's like, I'm not talking about seeing a first-run film necessarily. I'm not talking about seeing necessarily like the first time you see Mad Max, the new Mad Max. That's not what I'm talking about.
Maybe like 6 months afterwards.
6 months, or even like Grease is on TV. Let's go watch the old Grease together, and let's all watch it, and joke about it. It's kind of a Mystery Science Theater experience. I feel like a Trojan horse coming in here encouraging this because I don't want to bring on the death of the video store.
Well, how about this? Everybody buys a copy of The Manchurian Candidate, and we get a phone call.
I was thinking of that. Get the rotary phones out and let's
get a conference number going. We can do it by speaker. It'll be great.
Right. I just feel like kids today. I feel like we need to develop new ways for people to engage with film culture, and I think maintaining physical spaces like this one is essential, absolutely essential. I feel like that should be part of it. I just feel like there might be something else, because I feel like there is a void. I feel like there's a huge... when I think about what I was able to experience from 85 to 2000, when it's what everybody did every weekend, if not more, and again, I know a lot of you guys still do it, but the fact that everyone's doing it on a national level or international level, it's something that can be retained in some way.
I think nobody knows what the next thing is.
No, this
and we're
is
all
so true.
like everybody's chasing it.
Right.
And whatever the standard is now, I was going to say historically won't be the same in 5 years, but it won't be the same in 2. Everything is going to go so much faster and change so much. And while we're doing that, while everyone is chasing the next thing that they think they should be doing, movies like Cop Car are going to disappear. That's a perfect example. A small film that gets picked up by a distributor with enough reach to get it everywhere.
Right.
And if it doesn't also go to iTunes and hit the front page, it'll just be, that weird Kevin Bacon movie I heard about. And no one will bother to check it out. Or maybe they'll look at the trailer. But you need people to actually engage with stuff and talk about it. And that's one way to do it. And the other way to do it is to, self-distribute the way Shane Carruth did with Upstream Color and tour mercilessly and never be home and constantly take your movie yourself to the next place that you're going to screen it, and hope that you can pull people out of their houses because it doesn't have Matt Damon in it. Like, it's no offense to Matt Damon, he's the guy that you want in your movie right now. Lovely guy, but now I feel I've insulted him. the idea of a film as the thing, like Finders Keepers. There's a great example that was at Hot Docs last year. Sorry, I've reached the point now where I'm going to be pointing and gesticulating. This is a great, weird... Have you seen this?
You can't lose the video store clerk in you, right?
Yeah,
you're
no.
just like,
I'm never going
it's in your
to
blood.
be able to stop. I'm the guy who forces stuff on his family. Finders Keepers is this amazing, bizarre documentary that you will not see if it's not in a film festival or it's not front and center somewhere. Because even there, it's just like, I don't quite get that. I don't know. Like, the package could have been more vivid. But then again, I don't know how. Has anybody seen Finders Keepers? Yeah. And you work here. That's my point. Nobody else has. It is great. It's bizarre and weird, and it's the blue one. So someone rent it. But yeah, you need the constant exposure, because I hadn't even thought about that movie 5 minutes ago, and then I saw it. It's like, oh, they need to know.
I think his movie is Gleason. His latest
Did he
movie.
make that? I haven't seen this.
It's Gleason, which is playing now. Clay Twill, is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so. I can check.
And a new thought. I've thought about this subject for a few years now because of the book. There's a new thought that I'm having, just in terms of one of the foundations of the book is that, for me, the video store generated the independent film movement pretty much.
Yeah, once the market was there, it was
a
filled.
market. It was totally a market. There were shelves that needed to be filled, and the studios at first were not doing it. And so suddenly there were these people who were wanted to make movies for very small budgets, and these smaller companies said, "Okay, sure, we got these shelves to fill. Let's make movies." And so the fact that you can directly say that the video stores across this country, generated the films that we all love today. In fact, you could just see the trickle, over the years. It's all, it's not a trickle, but it's a domino from that time.
Reservoir Dogs was financed partially through video sales,
Reservoir Dogs,
pre-sales. Before a frame of film was shot, Live Entertainment had already...
Yeah, Live Entertainment, Gas, Food, Lodging.
The IRS days, Delusion, and all those Carl, what's his name? Carl Jan.
Franklin?
No, One False Move is another one.
One False Move,
But yeah, everything that Sony put out before it was Columbia TriStar's video label and Miramax's early days.
Sex Lies videotape.
Sure.
So there was an economic engine behind it all. That economic engine is largely gone. I'm curious how much of the studios rely on their ancillary benefit, the revenue that comes through DVD. It's a business. I'm sure they're getting some income from it, but that's no longer what's going to keep this alive. It's going to have to be more from the people. I think it's really. It's like, not to be too people powery about it, but I do think in some way this whole movement of nonprofits and video stores as these sort of community places, it's going from being an economic engine to a people engine or a fan engine that's going to have to keep it afloat. That's much more difficult because we know we live in a capitalist society. The economic engine keeps things going, but there must be some balance that can be achieved that can keep it going. So.
Part 2 of the Tom Roston and Norman Wilner Q&A with some audience participation will be posted roughly later this week. As mentioned at the head of this program, my own podcast interview with Roston and a review of his book are available at KQEK.com, in addition to a related book review of Noel Mellor's Adventures in VHS. Near the end of their discussion, Norm Wilner mentioned a video label called IRS Media, who produced a series of oddball films that were aimed at the home video market, and one of them, Carl Copert's Delusion, I reviewed at KQEK.com from the widescreen Laserdisc I bought because Norm brought the film to my attention in 1991 and rightly said, "You'll like this." 25 years later, I know, 25 years later, it's still a great little film, unavailable on DVD and Blu-ray. If Twilight Time's listening, this would be a great title to release with Barry Adamson's isolated soundtrack. That's just my 2 cents. Coming very shortly are separate podcast interviews with the directors of The Age of Consequences and Do Not Resist, 2 highly provocative documentaries currently screening at the Hot Docs Ted Rogers Cinema. And lastly, my blog at KQEK.com will also provide links to those curious to see and hear Percy, the world's happiest dog. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please visit KQEK.com's Facebook page and follow our Twitter feed at mondomark_KQEK. All podcasts are available via Libsyn, iTunes, and YouTube. The editorial skills responsible for this podcast are also available for hire. If you require audio editing, mixing, and cleaning up interview recordings prior to publication, please visit mondomark.com for more info and to hear demo reels. Until next time, this is Mark R. Hassan, editor of KQEK.com. This podcast is copyrighted 2016 by Mark R. Hassan.